So over the past couple of summers, my dad and I have gotten into some housing projects on a regular basis. And by that, I mean I tell him that I need a project done, and so he comes out and does it. We've put in tile floors, we've put in hardwood floors, we've painted walls, we've hung screen doors, we've built patios. And again, by that, I mean he is the one with the knowledge and the skill, and I hand him stuff. We have very specific roles. I've learned that when he comes, though, he gives me a ballpark, and he says, it's going to cost about this much, and it's always wrong. It's always much higher than what he anticipates. He says it's going to take about this long, and it's always wrong. It's much longer than he actually anticipates, and it always takes many, many, many more trips to Lowe's than anyone would care to make. You might as well just drive back and forth because you're going to need something, right? When we're doing these projects, there'll come this moment where something is not going right. The things don't fit. The angles are wrong. There's a complicated piece. And so he'll just sit and look at it. And he'll move to the other side, and he'll look at it. He'll move to the other side, and he'll look at it. He'll go take a nap. He'll come back. This is a true story. He'll come back, and he'll have it figured out. And when he puts it together, I've never seen a project foil him. When he puts it together, he looks at me. This is classic Roger Johnson. He looks at me and he says, "The impossible just takes a little longer." Now, I've told him that I'm telling this story this morning. That's a phrase that he says you can use. So if there are moments in your life where you feel like you have accomplished the impossible, you're allowed just to say, "The impossible just takes a little longer." I thought of this phrase this week as I was reading Hebrews 11. This story of people who have lived by faith, who have accomplished things that seem to be impossible, who have done things and lived lives of excellence and faith, who've inspired us and called to us, who continue to push us forward. You read the stories of these men and women who have lived these lives of incredible commitment to faith, of incredible commitment to God, who have joined God's work in the world. And in Hebrews 11, they are laid out for us. Their stories are told, and it is beautiful. They are stories that inspire us and challenge us and comfort us and call to us. This, in many ways, is the hall of fame for faithful people. When I was about 15, I went to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. My parents surprised me with a trip. We were somewhere else, and they said, "We're going to stop in Cooperstown." So we stopped in Cooperstown. They did not realize when we stopped in Cooperstown that first trip that it was Hall of Fame induction weekend. So there were like 80,000 people there. Most of the city of Philadelphia was there, I think. And so we walked through the Hall of Fame like shoulder to shoulder, right? It was pretty tight. But you could still see things. You could still see the plaques of these players that I had watched and read about and learned about. And it was this just amazing experience to keep an eye on that. In Hebrews 11, imagine that you are walking down the hall looking at the plaques of the stories of these people who have lived faithful lives, of these people who've encountered difficulty and challenge, of these people who lived in these extreme and extraordinary ways. We read the stories of Abraham and Isaac. We read the stories of Jacob and Enoch. We read the stories of these women and men who continue to call us towards deeper faith. And the thing that shows up throughout Hebrews 11, and if you haven't read it in a while, go back and read it this week. That's like your homework. Go read Hebrews 11 this week. The thing that shows up over and over and over again in Hebrews 11, that the power of faith is not just simply something that comforts us or feels fuzzy and good and warm on the inside. The power of faith is the very thing that brings forth life from death. Do you hear that? The power of faith is the very thing that brings forth life from death. Over and over again, as you read Hebrews 11, we read stories of those that were dead who became alive through faith, of women who received their dead through resurrection, of Rahab who was not persecuted and put to death, but was brought forth to life. Over and over again, we hear these stories of the ways that faith brings forth life, and we are reminded that God came in the world not to make bad people good, but to make the dead alive. That's the hope we hold to. That is the thing that we cling to. That is the thing that sustains us and keeps us, that God is with us, and that even in the face of death, that's not the end of the story. One of the great honors for me as a pastor, one of the great privileges that I have in ministry, as maybe as strange as this sounds to you, are the opportunities to do funerals. Because I get to sit with families in a moment in their life where things are broken and hurting, where there's grief and loss. They invite me in, and it is a tremendous honor and privilege. And I get to hear these stories of these people who have lived incredible lives of faith. Most times when I do a funeral, I sit down with the family and I say, tell me the stories of this person. And for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, they tell me the stories of the things that they loved and the things that they did, of times they remember, but over and over again, these stories of people who have followed Jesus seem to come to the surface. The stories of people who have lived in faith, the stories of people who have taken extraordinary steps, the stories of people who have read their Bibles until the pages have fallen out. And I could name for you name after name after name of these folks who have called to me and continue to do so. When I leave those conversations, I am inspired and moved. Because you see, faith doesn't just belong to the heavy hitters. It doesn't just belong to the Abrahams and the Enochs and the Isaacs. Faith is lived out in our midst by ordinary people who learn to do extraordinary things because of faith. Who are the people that have taught you faith? Who are the people that you could touch and talk to and know that have taught you faith? Who've taught you what it means to follow Jesus? I want you this week, if those people still walk with us on this earth, to call them and thank them. Don't save your gratitude for when they're gone. Thank them for the ways that they have inspired you. Thank them for the ways they have called to you and challenged you. Thank them for the ways that they have helped you deepen your faith. And if they have already passed to that great cloud of witnesses that the author of Hebrews writes continues to call us forward, give thanks to God for a life well lived that continues to inspire and call to us. See, that's the beautiful thing about faith. Faith is the outflow of ordinary people who are willing to do extraordinary things for God. What I like about the end of Hebrews 11 is it lists for us all these people that maybe you haven't heard of other times, right? It lists for us Jephthah and Samson and Gideon and Barak and these judges that we don't normally talk about, right? The last time I preached a sermon on Jephthah was not recent. When I was in seminary, this is true, when I was in seminary, first preaching class assignment, our preaching professor made us preach out of Judges because he said, I don't want you preaching somebody else's sermon, and nobody preaches on Jephthah from the pulpit. You've not heard this before. Right? So these are the stories that are put in front of us. And I love the fact that these are the people that the author of Hebrews chooses for us, because the author of Hebrews is reminding us that faith is for us, that faith is for everyone, that faith is at work in the lives of people, ordinary people whose stories we may not know, but who continue to live these lives of faith. And they go on to list all these ways. They administer justice. They bring forth righteousness. They oversee kingdoms. They, over and over again, this list of the things that they do as these ordinary, nameless people live faithful lives. And we then are called to be people who learn what it means to live faithful lives. When I think about faith, when I think about the way that I would define it, and this is my definition, it is this willingness to dream big, holy dreams and to take big, holy risks. It is an understanding that faith is with us in the moments of loss to comfort us, and faith is with us in the moments of comfort to challenge us. In those moments when we have become comfortable and secure, faith calls us beyond ourselves into God's grand story. And in those moments where we are brokenhearted, faith reminds us that in life and in death and in life beyond death, God is with us. In those moments of uncertainty, faith comforts us. We sing that a song here at this service. The end, the last phrase is, when the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. For me, that's the beauty of faith, that no matter what we face, we can have this deep trust and assurance that God is holding tight to us. And because of that, we are able to venture and to go to places that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. I told you this story before, but when I was in Kentucky on a mission trip in this little church in the mountains, I saw a sign that said, "The sign of God is that we are led to places we did not intend to go." I put it on this stole because for me it's the idea of faith, that we are led to places we didn't plan, that we are led to places we couldn't have imagined, that we are led into people's suffering and heartbreak that we wouldn't have chosen, that we are led to people and circumstances and situations that we wouldn't have picked, because God calls us in faith to move beyond ourselves, to move into the lives of others, and to face the uncertainty unafraid. There may be some of you today who just showed up in Morgantown, and this was not where you intended to go. This wasn't the plan you had. This wasn't what you thought was going to take place. God is with you. There may be some of you that have lived here all your life, and the future seems set or it seems unclear. God is with you. There may be some of us who are facing new opportunities and new beginnings. God is with you. Because of faith, we can go to places we didn't intend to go. You see, faith is not just a mental exercise. Sometimes I think in the church that we think if we have enough faith, it's because we've learned and we've thought and we know things, and that growing in us is something more than that. Faith is not just a mental exercise. For the writer of Hebrews, faith is putting your life on the line, this life and the life that is to come. Faith is a willingness to move beyond ourselves and to step out. It's a willingness to step into the lives of others. It's a willingness to follow God wherever God might call. That's the work of faith. Not simply to stand back, but to step forward. Not just to think about it, but to do about it. To get your hands dirty, to get your shoes dirty, to take the steps that God calls you to. I know there are some of us here today who God is calling to do crazy and outrageous things. I know there are some of you that God has placed a dream in your heart, and you're saying, I don't know that I can do it. Faith isn't just a mental exercise, it's a willingness to say, I'll follow God wherever God might lead. Maybe today is the day you respond to God's call. I think it's so fascinating in Hebrews 11, verse 29, and as I was reading it this week, verse 29 and verse 30 tell us the story of the Israelites. And it says, by faith, the Israelites crossed the Red Sea on dry land. And I read that and thought, but that's not true. God did that work, right? It's not like the Israelites did that work, and it made it sound like it was their faith that made it happen. And then it says, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell. And I thought, that's not true either. That's something that God did, right? It's not that they just marched around and did it. You see, faith is not something we muster. Faith happens when we join our lives with God. Faith happens when we decide that we're going to join in God's story, when we're going to partner with the work that God is doing. Faith happens, miracles happen, extraordinary things happen when we say, God, wherever you are already at work, I'll join. If that means crossing the sea, I'm with you. If it means marching around the walls of Jericho, I'm there. Wherever it is that you call, I will join. Where's God at work in your midst? In your community, in your neighborhood, in your school, in your workplace? Where are the places where God is at work, where you are being invited to partner with God in the work that God is doing to bring forth justice and righteousness, to bring forth compassion and humility and grace? Where is God inviting you to a deeper sense of mercy? Where is God inviting you to announce the reign of God's kingdom that makes all things right? Maybe you know. Maybe you say right off the bat, I know, man. I know what that looks like for me. Maybe you say, I don't. This week, maybe a prayer is this: God, show me how I can partner with you in your work in the world. God, show me how I can partner with you in your work in the world. If we pray that and are faithful, God is faithful to say, it's here, and it's here, and it's here. Why don't you join with me? But the faith that we practice, the faith that we live, the faith that we hold to is not just a faith that means that everything's good. I'm afraid in the church sometimes we've gotten this idea of the prosperity gospel of health and wealth wrapped up with faith. So if we have enough faith, things are going to go well for us. If we have enough faith, we're going to be blessed. If we have enough faith, we're going to live an easy life. But if you read Hebrews 11, that's not what happens, is it? Because the second half is people are tortured and cut in half by swords, and they are facing incredible odds and difficult challenges. Not because they lack faith, but because they have faith. I don't know what challenge, what uncertainty, what loss or baggage you carry today. But I know this. I know that it is faith that sustains us in the midst of difficult times. I know in moments of grief and loss, I know in moments of suffering and hardship, I know in moments of anxiety and uncertainty, God is with us. I watched a fascinating interview this week. Maybe you saw it. Stephen Colbert, who is a late-night TV show host, was interviewed by Anderson Cooper. And they had a really serious interview. And if you haven't watched it, Google it. It was just this week. And they have this talk about suffering because Colbert has experienced in his life some significant tragedy. And as they talk, you can see that Anderson Cooper is so moved by his answers. But Colbert says to him, in my faith tradition, I have a Savior who suffers alongside of me. And it's a beautiful answer to this moment of uncertainty, this deep sense of faith, this deep assuredness that is not shallow, that's not fleeting, but is certain that no matter what we face, God is with us. That's the kind of faith I want. That's the kind of faith that I long for. That's the kind of faith that I need. Not that's shallow, not a faith that pushes away the problems, but a faith that is able to embrace them and hold them, knowing that God is on our side. We only get that faith by keeping your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who's walked this life, who calls us to this life, who leads us forward in this life, and who welcomes us to the throne of God. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Hold tight to the faith that sustains you. Be willing to take big steps, to dream big holy dreams and take big holy risks as we follow the God who's called us. That the things that for us may seem impossible, we realize they may just take a little longer.